We Summon the Darkness, a movie that I thought was really underrated, so I wanted to talk about. I actually really enjoyed this movie. If you look up the trailer on YouTube, the first thing you'll see is this clip. It's not even the trailer. I got it as an also recommended on that Capone movie that had Tom Hardy in it. And the clip is basically a direct reference to The Craft. The Craft, the mid 90s witch movie, high school witches, Fairuza Balk, Neve Campbell. I mean, I can see the homage. I don't really see leading your marketing campaign based on an homage to an old movie that a lot of the people who are going to see this thing probably don't remember. But who knows? Anyway, it's a really good movie, and it's gotten more or less across the board fives from every review I've seen of it. IMDb, most people who watch it, everyone just seems to be saying that this movie is fine. Not good, not bad, just middle of the road, whatever. It's a thing I saw. I think that's really unfair. And I think that that's in large part because it's a movie that really kind of takes you for a ride you're not really completely prepared for.
Police came across another grisly murder scene last night.
Wait, I want to hear that.
The walls covered in satanic symbols.
Another gruesome, ritualistic murder claimed the lives of 6 people last night following a heavy metal concert that local religious groups were protesting.
It stars Alexandra Daddario, who starred in Texas Chainsaw 3D, The True Detective first season, Baywatch the movie, if anyone remembers that even was a thing that happened. And she's been in a few other things, Malevolent. I would actually say Alexandra Daddario is probably my favorite actress working today. There might be a couple of people in front of her, but she's very high up there. And the reason is because not just that she's good looking, she's very good looking, but that's not the only reason. The reason is that she goes for it in her roles. She really is willing to go insane in her movies. She doesn't mind looking ugly or looking crazy or looking silly. Again, if you saw her in Baywatch, don't go by that movie. That movie did her a tremendous disservice.
Careful now. There's a lot of evil out there.
You don't think we can fend for ourselves?
Usually she's actually really good in her movies, and I'd like to see her get a truly great role. This is a very good role. This movie is from the director of My Friend Dahmer and the writer of Burying the Ex. Now, My Friend Dahmer is a very somber, depressing drama about the high school life of Jeffrey Dahmer, the serial killer. And Burying the Ex is a pretty funny comedy horror, mostly comedy, from Joe Dante, the guy who did Gremlins and The Howling, which also starred Alexandra Daddario. So he wrote both movies. I don't know if they're dating or if they're just friends or if it's just coincidence. Burying the Ex is a pretty good flick. It's a little under budget, so the movie in places shows that they didn't have enough money to make the movie they were trying to make. But it's fine. My Friend Dahmer is just hard to watch. I did not enjoy watching My Friend Dahmer. I don't know if you can make a good movie about Jeffrey Dahmer. The guy's life was just too depressing and too pathetic. But anyway, it is interesting seeing those two very different filmmakers come together to make this kind of movie. And it's a cool flick. So Alexandra Daddario stars along with her 2 friends, blonde and dark-haired girl. I didn't recognize either actress. But they're going to a heavy metal concert in the late 80s. And they encounter this bus, it's not really a bus, van load of dipshits. One of them is Logan Miller, who he's popped up in a bunch of things. He was in a movie called Plus One that I thought was very good. He was on The Walking Dead for about a minute as Morgan's protege, the kid with the staff that did all the fighting, and then he got killed because The Walking Dead got into a habit of killing off every likable character and then keeping the boring characters on forever and ever and ever. But he was on The Walking Dead for a minute. He's been in a few other things. But, it's him and 2 other guys that I didn't recognize. Basically, you could just almost do them like Russian stacking dolls as the big fat guy, kind of normal build guy, and then Logan Miller's kind of the small guy. So 1, 2, 3. Then the 3 pretty girls, they encounter these 3 idiots by them throwing a milkshake at their car, because that's the thing people do, I guess. And these 3 idiots claim to be in a band, and the girls, they kind of flirt with them and kind of don't. It's not clear if they're teasing them or not. But this is all against the backdrop of both groups, the guys and the girls, going to see a heavy metal concert in this kind of out of the way venue, and they're all really into the music. The guys claim to be in a band. The girls clearly seem to know their shit. And while this is going on, they're discussing a series of murders that have occurred, a satanic murders that are occurring all across the nation. So this couldn't possibly have been all the work of one person. This seems to have been the work of multiple groups of killers. So, the Satanic Panic, if you're familiar with that, it was a phenomenon that occurred mostly throughout the 1980s where people were absolutely convinced that there were satanic cults everywhere. And most people would argue it was fallout from the paranoia created there in the 1970s, the hippie movement, the Manson family killings, not to mention movies like The Exorcist and The Omen, which were massively successful. It's hard to overstate just how big those movies were compared to modern times, because even without adjusting for inflation, movies like The Exorcist and The Omen and Rosemary's Baby were huge hits. Then you adjust for inflation, and they were like up there with the Marvel movies. Those things were colossal. So yeah, there was this thing called the Satanic Panic, and that's what this movie's sort of based around. That's the only reason it's set in the 1980s. Beyond that, there's no reason this movie needs to be set in the 1980s. And to its credit, it doesn't lean too heavily on, 80s nostalgia. That's a thing. You don't get a lot of, hey, look, I have a Rubik's Cube. Back to the Future. That was a movie that came out in the 80s. That was really good, right, guys? It doesn't do too much of that. There's not a lot of 80s nostalgia. This movie almost literally could have removed every reference to the 1980s in probably shaving off 45 seconds of the movie and just having a throwaway line of, oh, we forgot our cell phones, because that's basically all the difference this would have made if this wasn't set in the 80s. And to make things even funnier, you get Johnny Knoxville. Now, some people probably don't even remember who Johnny Knoxville is, but he was the lead. He was the guy that kind of ran the show Jackass. Jackass being the stunt show that ran on MTV, where the idiots would basically do really dumb stuff, and then sometimes they would try and hurt each other, and sometimes they would just make absolute fools of themselves. And, basically those guys were train wrecks. You had a lot of overdoses and accidental deaths and trips to, the ER with them. But Johnny Knoxville was the one who ran the show, and weirdly enough, he was the only one who seemed to be okay. He's had a kind of a mid-level B-list actor career. He's in this movie as a pastor, and I like the fact that he doesn't play it like a joke. He plays the role very straight. It's not like Johnny Knoxville's a pastor, he's going to be wacky, because he usually does comedy. No, he plays the role straight. I won't say he's great, but he's good. He's fine. You don't avoid the movie because you think Johnny Knoxville's going to ham it up. He doesn't. But yeah, the whole cast is good. So essentially you have 6 main characters and Johnny Knoxville in what you could call an extended cameo. I think he's in 3 scenes, but he's good. He's fine. I thought this was very entertaining. I liked the kind of role reversal in it. I thought it was, the characters are all entertaining, they're all engaging, they're all likable, and that's kind of a problem now, especially if you like movies about heavy metal, because movies about heavy metal have this weird tendency to treat heavy metal fans as complete fucking idiots. And I love heavy metal. And it's weird because you would assume that people making movies about heavy metal would be fans, but it seems like they tend to look down their nose at the fans, like all heavy metal fans are stoners or incredibly stupid or sluts or moron, just kind of putting them in that bag. And this movie doesn't do that. This movie also seems to, the conversations they have are the kind of conversations that people who are really into the music would have. Now, they're kind of basic. They're referencing Metallica. They're not referencing Slaughter or Dying Fetus. They're referencing fairly well-known bands. But it works. At least they seem to know what they're talking about. It doesn't just feel like they read a Wikipedia article and said, yep, got it. The girls are very, very attractive. I'm not going to lie. The guys, I guess they're fine. The one guy, like the most significant guy, he's probably kind of would be considered a pretty boy. And the guys actually show more skin than the girls. That was sort of funny. There's some digs at televangelism, the hucksters, the guys who go on TV and say, give me your money because you gotta love God. There's definitely some shots taken at that. There's some decent gore. Third act is a little weak. The score is terrible. This movie, I swear to God, they scored this movie with freesounds.com. This is the worst score I've heard in a good movie. Not the worst score I've heard, but the worst score I've heard in a good movie. Because I like this movie. The score is trash. The score feels like they ripped it off of freesounds.com. It has nothing. It doesn't help the movie at all. It's just background noise. Anyway, beyond that, I really like this. I think it's being dismissed a bit unfairly. I think this is very much something that's worth seeing. I think that it's atypical as a horror movie, but in a good way. It kind of is unpredictable. And I would actually say, read the synopsis on IMDb. Don't necessarily watch the trailer, because I could actually kind of see some of the twists coming based on the way the trailer's edited. But, yeah, it was good. I liked it a lot. I actually would say I probably like this more than any movie I've seen this year so far. So it just bothers me that it's getting across the board 5s. It's getting across the board B to B minuses. It's like it's being treated as something dismissible. I think that this is a really good movie. So I'm going to get into spoilers now. So spoilers. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay, so I could tell by the trailers, spoilers, blah, 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 that the girls are going to be the villains. The trailer kind of set that up. Now, I think that's why this movie's a little bit hard to market, a little bit hard to review, because halfway through the movie you realize that the girls, the three leads, Alexandra Daddario and her 2 friends, are the villains. They're caught in this nationwide, I don't even know if you'd call it a cult, but conspiracy by Johnny Knoxville's character, who is Alexandra Daddario's dad, to convince the citizenry of the United States that there are satanic cults committing murders everywhere to drive them to the church. So, and Johnny Knoxville is corrupt as hell. He's hoarding money, keeping it for himself. Not, he's very corrupt. But the 3 girls are the villains, and they kidnap the 3 guys. And they strip the 3 guys down to their underwear, tie them to a chair, torture them. Like I said, it's very much about a role reversal. And it is kind of funny, because you can sort of tell that that's what they were thinking. Is like, maybe an early draft of this script was the 3 guys kidnapping the 3 girls. And like, well, we could swap this and it would be a little bit different. And it is, and it's fun. And again, I can't overstate how good Alexandra Daddario and the blonde actress are. I'm not familiar with her work. I looked her up, and she hadn't really been in anything I'd seen. But they're both very good as villains. They are exceptional. They're very entertaining. The 3 guys are Logan Miller is always really good. I've seen him in a few things. He's very good. The issue this movie runs into is that essentially it's 2 leads, or not really leads, because they don't have any more screen time than anyone else, but it's 2 good characters, are the runaway, which is the 3rd friend of Alexandra Daddario's, and she's kind of bland. Like, she drops in and out of the movie, and ultimately she's this movie's final girl. She's the hero. So she's a little bland. And then the guy who ends up being the most prominent is the least interesting of the 3. He's the most handsome, I guess you'd say, but he's the least interesting. So I guess it's kind of a problem that the 2 hero characters, quote-unquote, are the most boring. And the 3rd act is a little tiny bit underwhelming, partly because it's a really crappy CGI fire. CGI fire almost never looks good, but it has some really crappy CGI fire. And it's just generally, the 3rd act is the weakest part of the movie. And I know if you go out on a weak note, you kind of leave a bad taste in people's mouths. And maybe that's why people are kind of dismissing this, but you watch it again, I think you'll realize it's very good. It just has kind of a weak 3rd act. But it's cool to look at the satanic panic through these lenses. The last movie I remember being about that time period is not House of the Devil. Now, I remember House of the Devil. I thought House of the Devil was overrated, but I do remember House of the Devil. That was a good while back. But the last movie I remember about satanic panic was about 5 years ago, and it was called Regression, I think, with Ethan Hawke and Emma Watson. It was not good. It was not a good movie. It's a time period that people have kind of just forgotten. It's kind of gotten memory hold. The idea that there were satanic cults everywhere was, for a brief period, satanic ritual abuse syndrome. Like the movie Session 9, if you haven't seen that, you should absolutely see Session 9. But it even talked about this. I think this was a common psychological issue was people who would have night terrors about the idea of being abused by satanic cults. It was ingrained in the American psyche for a little while during kind of the 1980s, like the Reagan era of America. This movie touches on that. It doesn't touch on it in incredible depth, but it does touch on it. And it is good. It's got some decent gore, some pretty funny parts. There's no sex in it. So don't watch it if you're hoping for that, but don't. It could have gone further. I guess that would be my main complaint. I think that's a lot of like horror fans, because it's really only horror fans talking about this, which again is unfortunate because this is a good movie. But horror fans that go into this wanting to see something really extreme, you hear a movie about satanic cults, you kind of want it to be harsh. This movie's never really harsh. I mean, there's some decent bloodletting in it, but it's all pretty standard. You'd only have to cut this movie by like 45 seconds at most, probably not even that, to get it on TV. Like, this thing could play on TV with basically just the removal of the word fuck. But it's good. I liked it. I like that it's kind of unpredictable. It's different. I thought Alexandra Daddario's performance was phenomenal in it. She's, I would say she's the lead. She's the villain, but she's the lead, and she's prominent throughout the whole thing. There's not much that doesn't work in it, aside from the score. The score is, I can't overemphasize. They really dropped the ball on this score. This is one of the worst scores for a good movie I can remember. But yeah, I think this thing's been unjustifiably overlooked, and I really think that people should go back. I believe it's getting a disc release in June. So hopefully when more people have access to it, they don't have to dig up on demand. It's just going to be out there. They can stream it, Redbox it. It'll be more or less everywhere. I hope more people see it. I hope more people kind of give it a shot, because I thought it was good, and I really enjoyed the hell out of this movie. That's all I got.